should be lowered. You open the gate, you put a drain on the backside, you open up Lake Martin. Lake Martin alone would lower stage on of $1 million, almost a foot. So again, I want to say thank you so much. You're setting the example and the lead, and this is something I'm very optimistic about. With public support and this parish taking the lead in that effort, we can get it resolved. Thank you. I want to present a copy of the Mississippi River Commission report that deals with that Buff Cocodra. It has the allocation and all the data you need to reference to our congressman what it is. If I can present it to you.
Thank you, Mr. Harold. You can give it to Council Clerk. We'll give it to Mayor President. That's even better. Give it to the boss. Read that report, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. At this time, we'd like to go ahead and call the vote on the resolution as amended.
District 1?
Yes.
District 2? District 3? District 4?
Yes.
Yes. District 6?
Yes.
District 7? Yes. District 9? Yes. Motion to adopt as amended is approved. Resolution 9, 2018, a resolution of the Lafayette City Parish Council authorizing the filing of an application with Keep America Beautiful for a cigarette litter prevention program grant for the Project Front Yard Initiative.
Got a motion by Councilman Bellard and a second by Councilman Boudreaux. Hold that thought. Councilman Conk, probably in regards to the previous
resolution, correct. And thank you, Council, for the support. And if I may request of the Council Clerk that she make a copy of this resolution available to other governing bodies in Lafayette Parish so that they may consider adapting and adopting similar resolutions and sending it on to Congress. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Now getting back to item number 8, we have a motion and a second. Any council discussion on item 8? Seeing none, any public comment?
No, sir.
All right, please call the vote.
District 2?
Yes.
District 3?
Yes.
District 4?
Yes.
District 5?
Yes.
District 6?
Yes.
District 7?
Yes.
District 9?
Yes.
District 1?
Yes.
Motion to adopt is approved. Resolution 10, 2018, a resolution of the Lafayette City Parish Council concerning electronic enforcement of motor vehicle speed limits in school zones.
Got a motion by Councilman Boudreaux. Need a second? Second by Councilman Cook. Any council discussion? Mr. Terrio, you have the floor, sir.
I see this is put up by the administration. Will y'all be the ones discussing this, sir? Okay. First, I want to say that I'm in favor of keeping our children safe, as I'm sure most people are. But there are questions that come, with that in order to achieve that. The first question I have, I guess, Mr. Robideau, is that was there a request to put cameras in school zones? Because was there a public outcry? Because we as a council did not see anybody from the audience. Nobody's contacted us or spoke to us in order to bring up cameras in school zones. And if so, there was a request by who?
No, there was no request made. That was a decision that I made as the administration to say that I think we can do a better job of enforcement in our school zones, and so that's why we're bringing forth this ordinance.
Resolution.
Resolution,
Got it. Just a little information that we have. When we put school zones here, how many school zones are we talking about? Do you know that offhand?
Do not know offhand, and I do know that their school zones include both the city and the parish, and that's something that as we move forward, if this resolution passes, that we will also have to decide as the elected members of the council on whether we want to limit it to the city, whether we want to include the school zones in the parish, and if so, how we handle the difference between the two.
Right, you jumped to my next question. That was it. And if we deal that, you're talking about the city and the unincorporated, is that what you're saying? So we're not talking about Broussard, Youngsville, Karen Crowe, because we can't do that. It would be the city
Right.
and the unincorporated.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, and from what I understood, and I asked somebody, and they mentioned that we're looking at somewhere around, if you're looking at parish-wide, city and unincorporated, 40, maybe 40-plus school zones.
That sounds reasonable. I mean, when you factor in elementary, middle, high school, public, private, there's probably at least that many school
At
zones.
least that. Okay. So if we're looking at putting these in the school zones, which the gist of this is for safety, and I'm sure you guys have investigated and looked at it, is that, do we have any data that shows how many traffic violations, tickets, citations, or warnings in school zones for 6 months or a year? Do we have anything the council can see?
As far as I know, I'm sure we could get something from the Lafayette Police to determine how many tickets have been written and where. As it relates to where we would decide to put these, because I think it would be cost prohibitive to put them in every school zone, and some school zones are on dead ends at the end of a neighborhood, and it wouldn't necessarily make sense. But I think intuitively, we all know where the high traffic areas are, and we certainly have the data on traffic counts. And so we'll be able to strategically put those where we think it'll have the biggest impact and it'll slow the cars down in those high traffic areas.
And that's what I was trying to understand, is naturally we don't put cameras where there's not a problem or an issue.
That's correct.
So, okay. Also, I guess while we're on that, well, no, I'm not going to even go there. It's a different subject. I myself went back, and a couple of people, maybe not as thorough as we should have, but we went back 30 years and did some research on traffic situations in school zones here in Lafayette Parish. And we have not found, although we could have missed it, but from the data that we looked at, we've not found a time when a child or student was involved in a vehicle accident on a major highway in front of a school, any school in Lafayette Parish, for the last almost 30 years. So I just wanted to bring up, we're looking at safety, but again, this is why I'm trying to figure out, why are we doing this if there's not a safety issue? Which is why I was trying to get a correlation between the tickets and school zones to understand why we're trying to improve safety when we're not having a problem. As we all know, cell phones are prohibited in school zones, unless of course they're hands-free. We all know that. A police officer can monitor cars driving the road or in a school zone, a car somebody using a cell phone. They can monitor that, but cameras cannot. Now, if they do that, and we're looking at, say, 40 school zones, you're looking at, what is it, an hour, 2 hours a day where the school zones are implemented to where you have to drive a certain speed, you're looking at 80 hours in a day. There's no way that could be reviewed in order by the cameras, so that was just something that I had thought of. Do we have a traffic enforcement division?
In the police department?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a problem enforcing our existing traffic laws?
Well, I would ask, when you say, is there a problem, it's kind of a leading question. Are we doing as good a job as we could? I think with the manpower that we have, but to station people at 40 schools or 20 schools or
and I understand.
10, I think they're doing a great job, and I obviously think that we'll make the schools and the areas around the schools a whole lot safer if folks know that they need to slow down when they're in the school zones.
And I want to be very clear. I agree with you. When our police officers are doing a great job, and those that do and are located at the schools, we support them 100%. Next question I have is in dealing with, of course, the optimum thing, Mr. Robideau, is collections. We've all had this discussion numerous times. Prior to your term on the council, we went through it 15, 20 more times. The first question I have is, how will this be different from the previous video camera procedures?
The only difference between how we're proposing to handle enforcement is that as part of this resolution, I'm getting the council to state their willingness to allow us to proceed to civil court to collect the fees. The ordinance exists that allows for that. It was not done in the past. There was a lot of reasons for that, I'm sure, not the least of which was that it had gone so long with it not being pursued that there was thousands of violators that you would have had to either decide to go back after them or just to forgive them, and it just, the whole process seemed to suggest unfairness to those that had abided by the law and paid their tickets or didn't speed. And so when we thought through this resolution, we said, look, we're going to start from scratch, and if you're found in violation of the speed limit in a school zone, then we are taking you to civil court, and we do plan to collect the fees. And I think that's one of the things that was expressed to me very clearly. That was where a lot of reservations came from as it related to the previous methods. And so we're going to add or make sure that that component is included, and we expect that the collections are going to be, you know, upwards of 90% if we're taking people to court, and they know that from day one.
Okay, well, you also touched on some future points. I appreciate that. That makes sense. So city court, one thing you just mentioned, and hopefully I understood that, but my next question was, will the violations be treated as a moving violation or a civil violation? And I think I heard you say civil.
I said civil. I'll glance over at Mr. Escott to make sure that my law degree is accurate, but it is a civil fine in our code.
Okay, so here's the thing, and like I said, I think about this stuff, you know me, I always go back and forth with it, but if it's a civil violation, there's no insurance reporting on it, which means it cannot affect any driver's insurance. That is correct, right, Mr. Escott?
Our ordinance doesn't speak to what's required under the insurance code, under the state statutes. Our ordinance simply declares it to be a civil violation and not a criminal violation.
But if it's civil, it's not classified as a moving violation under the state laws. If it's a moving violation, and let's say if a police officer, if a police officer were to issue somebody a traffic violation in a school zone, then that would be mandatory based on our existing legislation that they have to show up. It's not a civil matter, it's considered a moving violation, and it would affect their insurance and be reported to statewide or local insurance companies.
I'm not familiar enough with the insurance code or the...
I'm just telling you from the research that I'm
All right.
going through here.
Yeah, I just know that our ordinance
you can
refers
follow
to
up
it as a civil violation.
and check on, so it is a civil. So here's the question I was getting at. If a police officer was issuing the tickets instead of the cameras, then none of these questions would exist, because it would address the civil issue because it'd be a moving violation. And also, an actual police officer is better deterrent, because people like to see police officers, I assure you, more than they do cameras. Mr. Robidoux, do you know offhand what kind of fines we're looking at in school zones?
I think the fines are already established in law, and no, I don't know what they are, but we're not changing that.
Would, Mr. Escott, would that be the same thing as the previous ordinances, maybe this council and the previous council had approved?
Yes, sir. It's under chapter 86. It's 86-185 that has the actual chart of whatever posted school zone speed limit there is, and then the range of fines depending on the speed determined.
Yeah, would you go from a minimum to maximum if you have that right there?
As far as, take for example, a posted school zone speed limit of 25 for a speeding violation of 31 to 35 miles per hour, it's $25. For 36 to 40 miles per hour, it's $50. For 41 to 45 miles per hour, it's $100. For 46 through 50 miles per hour in a 25 zone, it's $200. And anything greater than or equal to 51 miles per hour is $300.
Very good, very good. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Robidoux, I think you'd mentioned earlier that you would like to see this, a new process of this, go to what's called city court here in Lafayette, and that in the past it did not do that, correct?
I said civil. My accent may have sounded like city, but I said civil court as opposed to criminal court. So I'm not sure, to be honest with you, which court it goes to.
That would be city court downtown, right?
Well, it could be, it depends on the amount of the violations, whether there's multiple violations that add up to a certain amount that reach the minimum jurisdiction for district court. More than likely, though, it would all be city court.
City court.
Filed civil suits for collection of overdue fines.
Okay, very good. So we're really looking, probably 90% of it would be city court handling these, I would,
If not more.
if not more. All right, so while we have that, and I happen to reach out to a few people with city court, and as we know, city court is not free. So, Mr. Escott, and this also comes to you, and Mr. Robert, I don't know if we thought about this, but if there's a fine of, say, $100 for a moving violation in a school zone, city court's not going to do this for free. So they're going to have to charge an additional fee on top of that in order to process somebody to do this. You understand where I'm coming from?
Sure.
So there's not only that, but the if you want to say the offender or the violator would have to pay the initial fine for the camera, but then pay additional court costs for city court.
True, more than likely, and that's contained in the ordinance as well.
Right.
And they would also pay an additional fine, I think it's 1.5 times the fine for their failure to pay in the first place.
Okay. Now, I did speak to some people at city court, and of course, and I would agree with them, their docket, Mr. Escott, is very, very busy as of right now. So if they take on this additional workload and this comes in, is city court going to need an additional judge?
That can't, I can't answer that.
You understand where I'm going here? Because the docket would be increased either, who knows how much with this.
If I could,
And I should say this as well. The likelihood that once a citation's issued, if it's not paid, outright, it goes to an adjudicative process, an administrative hearing. That administrative hearing involves adjudication officers, hearing officers, and a hearing is had. They have an opportunity to present their evidence, and then a decision is made. Once that decision is made, if they are unsuccessful in overturning that citation, then and only then do they have the right to appeal that citation to district court.
District court.
Right.
Okay.
Now, it would be only the ones, the only ones going to city court would be the ones that either don't pay the fine outright or don't pay the fine after found liable or responsible through the adjudication hearing, and either choose not to appeal or fail to pay.
Mainly fail to pay. Mainly those that just will not pay the fines
Correct.
would be going directly to city court. All right, and you jumped ahead. That was some of the additional questions I have. Is that currently, I remember under the ordinance, we have a portion of our police department that is reviewing and acting in a capacity to handle, they handled the old video cameras from Red Flags. Is that still going to be in play?
I believe they will still have the review officers reviewing the videos or pictures, whatever it may be, to verify the existence of a valid citation.
And will they also be classified as the adjudicators?
No, they are not the same.
I wanted to make sure we had that out. That would be separate adjudicators.
That's correct.
And would we have a new batch, or would we have the same adjudicators that they had for Red Flags?
I don't know who the old batch was because I was not here at the time, and they were not active when I became city parish attorney. So I don't know who they were before to tell you who they would be now.
And I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand. We just don't know at this point. Some other discussions, I think this council and the council prior to it, we also had a number of discussions, because when it came up with the cost, and I think Ms. Escott, you and I had this discussion a while back with Red Flags, is that how much is it going to cost us to sue those that don't pay the fine? Because here's the question. will there be a special attorney to handle these particular lawsuits? And if so, who's that going to be, Mr. Ascott? Or has that even been decided?
It has not been decided. I believe the ordinance grants me the authority to choose one or more attorneys to be engaged in that service. If I remember correctly, and I need to put my hands on it real quick, I thought I recall reading in the ordinance that the recovery of court costs and attorney's fees is also an added component that we can recover if a citizen forces us to pursue them in city court and get a judgment. Just like any other litigant, when someone is injured in an auto accident or anything else, if they sue somebody to get damages and they win, they're entitled to court costs. Now, attorney's fees is an added component that is, I think, in the ordinance, but I can double check. So we would be presumably made whole, so to speak, at the cost necessary to chase that particular citizen for being responsible for what they owe.
Now, you're saying it's in the ordinance. The new ordinance that'll be bringing up to us, or the old one that passed?
There
Because
is
I don't
no-
remember the attorney fees being added into the
Yeah,
old one.
and again, like I said, I wasn't quite sure about the attorney's fees. I thought I had seen it in there, but I can double check real quick.
Because
But-
what it was, we were going to submit a whole batch of violations that were unpaid, but the council had agreed, because we had all analyzed it, and that you figure for one lawsuit would cost anywhere between, by an attorney, because we know attorneys, they're very smart and high dollar, they don't go for a low amount of money, is that anything under, I think it was $100 or $125, that they would not file suit, because the cost of an attorney to go and try to collect that amount lower than that would be unreasonable, and it would cost more for the attorney than it is for the violation.
I understand, there is a business decision at some point. However, if you take the approach that the mayor president is suggesting in terms of a zero tolerance enforcement, then you get a much better result, and that all evens out in the long run.
Okay. For right now, Mr. Roboto, do you have any contractors in mind as to who might do this?
We have been in conversation with both Redflex and ATS, and have had conversations with both of them as to what type of contract they would be willing to do. Is it related to school zone only? But until I have a resolution in place, I didn't think it was prudent for me to negotiate of any kind of final contract, because unless it's going to be significantly different than the previous process that existed, then I think I'm just wasting everybody's time trying to go to negotiate a contract. If I can't enforce it in school zones, then it's not worth making them or us spend the time and effort and cost associated with trying to negotiate a contract. So we have visited with those two groups, explained to them what we're trying to do, received some information from them, and so all of that's currently on hold.
Okay. As you can see, that's why I was trying to go through this process to see if this was going to be the same thing as a previous vendor and the difficulties that's going to be associated with it. I think City Court, Mr. Escott, may be something that's going to need to be looked at in the event that this does move forward. I would still like some kind of information as for traffic data, if we can get it, to see if there's actually a need to put them in the school zones. The two contractors, are they going to do a sealed bid, or how's that going to work? Do we know?
I think it would be a negotiated contract that I would then bring to the council for approval.
Okay. One final thing, and I'll end on this. One thing I had asked for a couple of times, one is, I think is the last discussion, Mr. Roboto, that we had about cameras, the previous vendor, is that I had asked for the data of all those intersections where they were taken down. I wanted the crash data, the speed data, and all that, and I've asked for that twice, and I still haven't gotten it. So That night, the individuals here did not have the data to provide us, and it's been a number of months now, so I'd like to see that information if that would be possible. As for now, Mr. Roberto, thank you. That's all I have. Mr. Escott, thank you. That's all I have for now.
All right. Councilman Boudreaux? No? Okay. Councilman Lewis?
I have a question, Mr. Escott.
Yes, sir.
If a ticket or citation is given in the city of Lafayette, and I hear you talk about city court, but if a citation is received in Youngsville or any parish, where will they go to court?
Wait, if the citation is issued in,
Well, that's right. We don't have you're not putting them in the school zones in the parishes yet, as of yet, right?
Well, it's certainly not in the other cities in the parish, like Youngsville
Right.
and Scott, Broussard, Dusson. We don't have jurisdiction in those
Okay,
municipalities,
I just want to
right?
double check, make sure. Just make sure we all understand. Okay, thank you.
Councilman Boudreaux?
Yeah, I guess I heard a number of Councilman Terrio's questions and some concerns. As me being at least one individual who's going to support this, I guess I feel compelled to just speak to a couple of them. I just don't think that we wait for something to happen in a school zone to improve a school zone. I think we learn in a very difficult and painful message with that in our country now as it relates to safety in schools in general. I think that's one of the beauties of technology, is that it allows us to do things better and do more things. So I was sitting and I said, has a council member ever gotten attacked at a council meeting? And I think Veronica been here about 25 years. I mean, I don't recall a council member ever getting attacked, but we have taken measures to make this facility safer, not only for us, but for everybody who attends these meetings. That was our reason. It wasn't because something had happened. It was because we had the opportunity to make it safer and it made sense. So the idea that maybe a child hasn't gotten hit in a school zone, thank you, Jesus. Thank you. Because I could only imagine what that would feel like for a family. But I just think that, when we have the opportunity to do something good and something that makes sense, I agree people like to see officers. This actually allows officers to do more in other things. It puts them in a position to deal with more of the person-on-person issues and the issues retailers experience, things we experience in our neighborhoods, as opposed to, that traffic person that stands there running radar. But keep in mind, it doesn't take away that. This does not replace the traffic division of the Lafayette Police Department. I see it as it enhances the traffic division of the police department. We took a lot of measures, even under the old program, to make this as law enforcement compatible and friendly as possible, and I think this is going to be even greater. Again, it already been stated, this is not going to be for every school zone. If there's 40, 50, 30, however many they have, it's not going to be in every school zone. The busyness at city court, everybody won't go to court. I mean, I think that's going to be a relatively very minute number. But those who do go to court, I think there are policies in place that will make sure that the cost factor doesn't fall back on this government as far as the ability to collect fees, court costs, and things like that from whoever that may be. So I kind of like the downsizing into the school zone issue. I think it allows us to be more creative with our officers, at the same time still offering up some enforcement measures. And the last thing we was afraid to say it then. I don't want to be afraid to say it now. It's going to generate money. Okay? Is something wrong with that? It's going to generate revenue, and it's going to pay for some things that we can't afford to pay for right now. I'm not going to insult the chief by calling him up here, but Lafayette Police Department, according to the national guidelines, according to the FBI guidelines, are probably somewhere in the vicinity of about 55 or 60 officers short for a city our size and our population. So we don't have enough. And if next week I was to ask our legal team to draft an ordinance to do a budget amendment to put enough money in the police department's budget to hire the number of officers we need to get up to our standard, that thing wouldn't stand a chance. So I don't want to mislead people into making it seem like we're doing something so horrible. It's going to have some safety aspects to it. It's going to generate some revenue that we're going to put right back into services that the people are going to benefit from, and it's going to still be in the area of safety and traffic. That's the whole story. I don't think that's too bad.
Thank you, Councilman Boudreaux. Councilman Terrio.
Yes, I don't think, Mr. Boudreaux, you were implying that I didn't believe in safety or providing safety for the school zones. Yes. I want safety, but I would prefer an actual officer there, not the cameras. Just think of it this way. If there is a violation or something that does happen and the cameras are there, that's after the fact. If an actual police officer is on site, on duty, armed and ready to go, what can be more appropriate than having somebody on site like that? A camera, all you're going to do is go back and review what's happened. An actual officer can engage and be involved in what's happening. That's my whole gist of this.
Cameras, the Shunick case was settled for cameras, not because an officer was in place. Cameras have a value. In 2018, cameras are valuable. These things right here have changed the way we live. So I don't want to minimize the impact of cameras. If, I will agree with you, if this government could afford, I just said it, to honor chief's needs, we could have a different conversation, but you and I both know that's not even realistic. What it costs to train in uniform, and we've got a retention issue. Right now, today, we got 3 officers, we got a few folks retired, that's a beautiful thing, but we got a couple of folks going into other industries because of what we pay them. So the idea that we're gonna sit here and say, you know, I want an officer there, yeah, that sounds really, really good. So do I. I want one, you know, on the corner by my house. Just that we can't afford to do that. So here's this technology that's available that allows us to have a different type of presence that supports that same activity of what the department does each and every day, and it allows them to move around a little differently. It allows them to capture some things otherwise that would not be captured. And you're right. If something happens in a school zone other than speeding or running through some open signs, there may not be an officer in that instance, that time, okay? I don't deny that, but we would have captured something, is what I'm saying. So, and hopefully, if ever we get to the point where, as a government, we're willing to do the things that we need to do to fully man and a police department to meet those criterias and put 2 men back in the vehicles and improve patrol numbers and all of that, I'm for it. But until such time, we got to use what is accessible to us. And this is just one of those things. That's all I'm saying. It's not a permanent fix. I mean, I could tell you this, the police department is in favor of it. I think
course they would be.
that speaks to it. I mean, you know, it's not as they're saying, hey, it's not one of those things where it's going to take my job. We do things where machine taking jobs all the time. Police, it ain't going to take an officer's job, but it's going to help him do his or her job even better.
Got you. Okay, and also, Mr. Robert, I know before you came into office, the police department as a whole was funded out of the general fund. It was done by a previous council where initially with red flags, they said this is only going to go toward traffic and parking and issues, okay? And then there was a bright idea and somebody said, no, we're going to take that money other than what it was designed to use, and we're going to take that money and put it toward the police department, pay for salaries and benefits. This same program is going to continue that option.
I think that's where it is in the budget now, correct? Yeah, and we're going to continue that. The budget that we passed, the money was put into the police department's budget.
Yeah, and I understand, you know, what a lot of people say. Again, y'all have your way of thinking, others have their way of thinking. I've been contacted by people or discussed it. We hear the comments, which we know, and Mr. Boudreaux congratulates you for saying that, and that this is, like you said, a revenue generator, and that really chaps a lot of people when they hear that. And when we hear, like, we want to find the busiest streets that has the most traffic, that's going to generate the most revenue, that's where we're going to put these cameras, okay? So if we have a smaller school zone that doesn't have as much traffic through it, that won't generate as much revenue, is there still going to be a camera there? No. It's going to be the 4 lanes, the 2 lanes, the high, low, you know, where you got a mass amount of traffic where you can collect the most money. And that's what people see when they see this. So, pretty much, yeah. So again, look, I'm just voicing the concerns from the people I've spoken to. So, Mr. Robideau, again, thank you. That's all I have, guys.
Okay. I'd just like to comment that the only people getting a citation, or whether there's an officer or not, is if you're breaking the law. It's as simple as that. If you're following the speed limit, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, you shouldn't get a citation. So whether the officer's there or not, if the officer's there and he catches you, you get a citation. You're guilty whether it's caught by an officer or the camera catches you over a certain radius. So, I mean, that's my philosophy. So, I mean, if everybody did what they're supposed to do, then the thing won't generate revenue and then it'll go away. So, Councilman Lewis.
Yes, Mr. Paul, I want to follow up on the question I was asking earlier. Can you explain to me the process of city court, the jurisdiction? Well, again, my question would be, if someone live outside of the city, like in Youngsville or Broussard, and they get a ticket in Lafayette, can we force them to come to court, being that they live in the parish?
Are you asking if they live in like Youngsville,
Correct.
Dusson, whatever?
Correct.
But they
pass
received
through.
a citation
In Lafayette, like in
in Lafayette?
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Anywhere, if they live anywhere.
You're testing my
Yes, I am.
law school knowledge
Yes, I
that I
am.
was supposed to learn 30 years ago. I've forgotten, but I suspect if it's, and again, let me qualify the answer by saying that I believe if it's similar to other concepts in the law, that you have jurisdiction, a court has jurisdiction in the area or the location where the violation occurred. So if the violation occurred in the city of Lafayette, yes, you could pursue that person in a court having jurisdiction within that geographical area to collect that fine.
So it wouldn't be that difficult, we just, the normal process, or?
I don't believe it would be.
We'll have to guess if this resolution passes and they start negotiation, I guess all of that will probably, I'm assuming, would need to be discussed with administration and work out all the, it's a good question.
Well, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Mayor President?
Thank you, and I certainly appreciate the conversation. And let me just wrap up by making a few comments. Yes, I think you'll find that in civil court, and you used Youngsville and places within Lafayette Parish, but if you're in Houston, if you live in, it doesn't matter. I mean, we're gonna either expect you to pay your citation, or we're gonna drag you back to court here to come and face the consequences. And the reality is, similar to what the IRS does, is when you show that you're willing to enforce the laws as they are written, then we will get the collections that are rightly due to the city parish government. As it relates to the safety issue, I will say that whether it be one of our motorcycle officers that are writing the ticket, it's dangerous for them to pull out onto the street and chase somebody down and pull them over and then head back to that location and then and do that over and over again. And I think Kenneth touched on the technology, and the technology exists that the radar guns are now are able to be connected to the process, and they can radar and video and get to the license plate, and they can turn around and radar the next one. They never have to get off of their motorcycle. And that technology's out there, and that's something that we'll have to decide if we want to incorporate that, because both agencies that we're talking to have that technology available. And now we have officers that are much more safe than they currently are, because they don't have to get on their bike and chase vehicles down in traffic. And so the technology is going to keep changing. I don't know where it's going to end up, but the reality is that videos and cameras and whatever new technologies come out there are going to make the policeman's job easier and allow them to be more efficient. And certainly, I'd like for our officers to be able to do whatever they determine is the best use of their resources. And if having cameras out there causes the public to say, well, I know where the motorcycle cop usually is, and when they see he's not there, they speed back up. Well, if they know the permanent camera's there, they say, no, that's where one of those cameras are, and we're going to go the speed limit through this school zone. And if it works that way, which is the way I think ultimately it would work, and that's why we're bringing the ordinance, I think it frees up our officers to do the other jobs that are just as important, but that they don't have the time to do. And I think it's a smart way for us to utilize existing technology to enhance policing efforts. And I think it's a win-win all the way around. And I'd appreciate your support of the resolution.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Terrio.
Mr. Rubino, thank you. One last thing, if you don't mind, whoever it is, which I'm assuming this council is going to move forward with it, I would say that whoever you choose, could you please provide us with some kind of character information on whoever it is? We know a previous vendor had a number of lawsuits, a number of issues, a number of circumstances that had come up. I would hope that that's provided to this council to give us a background of what they have been involved with, what they won, what they've lost. That would be something that I think the public would need to know in the event that whoever the vendor is that's going to be used, that's going to be collecting money from them, that's something we have here in Lafayette. So,
Sorry about that.
Certainly happy to do that. And then again, the two that we're discussing it with are Redflex and ATS. And, the council certainly welcome to Google them, tonight when they get home if they want to, and find out everything they want. But we will also provide a package to you guys and give you their background and how long they've been in business and where they operate and all the statistics associated with them as an entity.
okay. That's all I have. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. Any other council discussion? Seeing none, can we please call the vote on the resolution?
We do have three
Oh,
speakers.
I'm sorry. We've been talking, so I lost track. Blue cards, please.
First of three speakers, Andy Abear.
Hey, Bruce has already got all the information right now.
It's called the City Parish Charter. Section 106, Special Powers. The city parish government shall have the right, power, and authority to pass all ordinances requisite or necessary to promote the protection and preserve the general welfare, safety, health, peace, and good order of the parish. As far as I know, everybody within the geographical boundaries of the parish come under special powers. And I believe you're acting in a discrimination process by only placing these cameras only in schools, in the unincorporated areas, in the geographical boundaries of the city of Lafayette. It says clearly, you have special powers to protect the good order of the parish. It doesn't say the unincorporated in the city. It says the parish. I had a couple of questions too. Where's the money going? If you put a fine and the ticket's issued in the city of Lafayette, does the money stay in the city of Lafayette document of money, or does it go to the parish? And if you issue a citation in the unincorporated areas, where does the money go? Does it go into the city coffers because you're going to the city court? And how many other laws or ordinances or parish violations are sent through the city of Lafayette court? Is this the first one? I think you need to broaden your horizons. Look into Parish 1. We voted to become unified, yet you enforce laws and pass laws that divide us. You make us fight amongst ourselves. Who's getting the money? Now I realize that newspaper article I read earlier about there's no money in the city, sales tax is declining, and the unincorporated sales tax is declining. Well, we'll pass an ordinance to catch people with a camera. You're looking for money. I can find you city money. I can find you city money right now. 80% of this council budget comes from the city of Lafayette coffers. Don't you represent us equally? You're a city parish. You represent us equally, yet the city pays 80% of your budgets and salaries. And guess what? You city folks out there that pay a parish tax, you pay the other 20%. You pay 100% of your salaries. I got another area you can find money. You remember you used to meet 3 times a month? Now you only meet 2 times a month. I think you ought to cut your salaries by 1/3 because you're no longer acting as a full council. Get that money out of that 80% of the city money that the city's given you and give it back to the city police department, because those are some of the finest people you'll find around. My last question. The last time we had red flags, a council member objected to the cameras in his district, and they were removed. Will you do that again? Can you do that again? Is that a possibility? I think you need to think this over again. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Boudreaux.
It might have been me who objected to the cameras. I don't know. Was that me, Andy? Was me who objected to the cameras? Yeah. When the program was initially put out, I didn't object to the cameras. I objected to the deployment. I think we were scheduled to deploy, oh my God, total of 25 locations maybe. And I think of those locations, I think 17 or 18 of them was in the minority district. It was all in districts 3 and 4. I was like, that don't make sense. I can't let that happen. What was that about? So it wasn't the program, it was the deployment of the locations that I think they had some bad science on. What does our charter say as it relates to meetings? How many times are we supposed to meet a month? Twice.
Can we get that on record, Mr. Ball?
So Andy, because he likes to reference the charter, and I love listening to him. Actually, what he just indicated is that we was only supposed to be meeting twice, but we was meeting 3 times, and there were no increases. So that wasn't a good one. So we only doing what the charter requires. And I gotta address these things because our debates are good when they're accurate. but when they're not, it misleads people, and that could be detrimental. So he brings up a good point, but just know, as he referenced the charter say meet twice a month. And that's where the savings actually took place, rather than forcing that third meeting with staff and everything else. We just simply followed the charter.
Good. You good, Mr. Boudreaux? Okay, all right. Next speaker.
Next speaker, Melanie Brevis.
I'll stand at this mic this time, just for variety. Melanie Brevis, still in Broadmoor, District 8. I'm a parent. My son is at Myrtle Place Elementary. My daughter will be there next year, so of course safety is a top concern of mine. However, I am not in favor of using these speed cameras as a method to improve safety. Councilman Theriot, thank you. You covered multiple points that I was going to make, and I think respectfully, given that we have not received clear answers to your questions, I just, going for a vote tonight just does not make sense to me in the least. Councilman Boudreaux, your last comment, our debates are good when they are accurate. Several of these comments up here have been grossly oversimplified. I apologize, but that's just the way I see it, and actually it is. I'm from Baltimore. Baltimore City and Baltimore County had an absolutely disastrous speed camera program in the school zones. I know Redflex was not good down here, but since you asked for reputable companies, I will add Xerox and Breckford to the list of companies to steer clear of, because they cost our Baltimore City thousands, probably even millions of dollars. The system was actually turned off in 2013 there. It was not reopened until 2017 because of so many errors that were uncovered. One, stationary cars being flagged for speeding, and in general, cars which weren't speeding being photographed. Some of the cameras had up to a 5% error rate. So 5 out of 100 cars were being erroneously ticketed. So I'm sorry, but a statement that you only get a ticket if you're doing something wrong is absolutely not correct. Issuing tickets to the wrong cars, no one reviewing the tickets and ensuring that there was verifiable speeding happening, no oversight by the state. Both the city or county and the private contractor stand to benefit from each ticket issued. So even though I hope you don't go ahead with this, if you do, please make sure not to put a bounty on each ticket, especially if it is being seen as a revenue generator, which it should not be if its primary goal is safety. Giving an incentive to a private contractor to benefit from each ticket is basically an incentive to issue as many tickets as possible, regardless of whether a driver was actually speeding. I don't care how important a goal of safety is. I don't care how important a goal of generating revenue is. It should never be built on the backs of potentially innocent citizens. That's just unconscionable, and it should be for every one of you as well. The real danger to school children, and I've seen this firsthand at my son's school, I've seen it at Broadmoor, I've seen it at several other schools, are parents in the car rider lines. Parents are cutting in car rider lines. They're pulling up onto the sidewalks. At my son's school, and he's a second grader, so I've been there for 2.5 years now, 2 times a child has come this close to being hit by a car driven by another parent. That will not be captured by a speed camera. So you were asking for data on police reports, there's your data. 2 times. I don't know if that gets reported. I don't know how widespread that is, but in my mind, you know, that's not going to be solved by a speed camera. That's going to be solved by an officer being at that school every day and putting some teeth behind car rider policy. Because let me tell you, my son, if he shows up with a plastic squirt gun, he'll get suspended. If he shows up not wearing his uniform, you know, he'll get sent home or I have to bring him clothes in. There is absolutely no teeth behind policy for parents and car rider lines. And there should be, because those parents are endangering our children's lives every day. And that is where the real problem lies. So again, I hope you do not go through with this because I think there's way too many unanswered questions. I think it would be a huge investment of money and time, and we shouldn't move forward with something when we have all of these questions. But if you do, please learn from Baltimore. Please give motorists a clear and easy avenue for appeals without having to go to court. In Baltimore, with their revised program, when they opened it, they actually have an ombudsman appointed for citizens to go to who can advocate and investigate their complaints. You need to post signs well before the cameras. Only make the cameras operational during school hours, including drop-off and pickup times, and have each alleged citation reviewed by somebody at the contractor's office, the Department of Transportation, and finally the police department to make sure that a ticket is verified before it's issued. And again, I would just urge you, parents are the real issue here in these car rider lines. I can't even drive fast past Broadmoor or anything else when there's a car rider line. It's not speeding, it's the parents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilman Terrio.
She brought up something just now, just kind of jumped out at me. Mr. Robideau, if you could add him back. She mentioned about time-wise when the cameras are going to be on. I'm assuming here, but you know what happens when you assume. I would imagine that your goal would be to leave them on 24 hours a day.
No, that wasn't really the goal. Anytime there's a school function, certainly the school hours, when their kids are getting dropped off and picked up, football game nights, if there's an obvious school event where there's going to be a lot of individuals there and, heightened possibility of accidents, then we would want the cars to slow down during those periods of time, but not 24 hours. That wasn't the intent.
So is there a chance that the cameras will only be functioning during entrance and exit school times?
There's probably a greater chance of that than there is 24 hours. To be honest with you, I haven't run the numbers. I haven't negotiated with the two companies yet to see how that would work out. But again, for me, when are the people on campus? When is the traffic there? And when's the greatest risk of a speeder actually causing an accident? That's when I want them on. I never intended it to be 24 hours.
6 to 6 is usually when school personnel are there.
Yeah, but the football game, night is thousands of people. It's probably even more than when school's in, because you get all the visiting school and all the family in. So there's a lot more traffic, a lot more individuals that are milling around, crossing the streets, on the sidewalks, in their cars. So, there's other instances there too. But again, all of that has to be looked at as we negotiate these contracts.
Okay. It brings up a lot of questions, but we can get into that later, though. Thank you so much. That's all I have.
Okay. Next speaker.
Michael Wood.
Hi there. Well, there's already been a lot said in opposition to this, and I'm going to leave pretty much all of that alone. Mr. Terrio asked a question in the beginning. He asked if there was any kind of public outcry for these speed cameras in the school zones, and Mr. Robideau, you said no, there was not. Well, what you've heard tonight is a public outcry to not have these cameras in the school zones. And I think that is the only kind of outcry you're going to receive from the public. You also mentioned that although in the last 30 years there hasn't been a single incident of a child being injured in a school zone due to an automotive accident, that's not a reason for us not to do a better job of making these school zones safe. To that end, I would like to share with you briefly a story of my own. Last year, I was ticketed for speeding in the Lafayette Middle School zone heading southbound towards University Avenue. I wasn't aware that I was in a school zone at the time because of the poor condition of the markings for that zone. The sign that is near the school is underneath the tree, and it's cast under the shade of that tree during the school hours. Simply putting a flashing signal on that one sign could alert drivers to the presence of that school and cause them to slow down. In court, I was able to interview the officer that wrote the ticket, and I asked him some questions about his work there at that zone. He confessed to me that 80% of the tickets that he writes for that zone are on the southbound lane. I brought some printouts here for you. I'm sorry, I'm only going to have one copy of this to share with you. What you're going to see is the way that the signs are marked up for the northbound travelway and the southbound travelway. If you compare the northbound signs to the southbound signs are shameful. Northbound, you have 4 signs, all in the clear light of day, all very obviously marked, and 3 of them are in very close proximity to the school. On the other hand, heading southbound, you only have 1 clearly marked sign with a flasher at Simcoe Street. The next sign heading southbound, which I've marked SB2 in these documents, you'll see is off to the side of a turn lane, and the third and final sign is under the shade of that tree. This school zone by itself, based on my observations of the officer's activity at this zone in the time since I received this ticket, which I have spent a lot of time studying this zone since then, and based on the testimony of the officer that I spoke to at my trial. Assuming that one police officer writes 1 ticket every 10 minutes for an hour and 50 minutes per day at one of these zones, we're talking about 11 tickets a day. I want to call it 10 to keep the math easy. My ticket was $185. 10 tickets, 90 days a year. He said he works about half the school days of the year. And $185, that's $166,500 for this one officer for this one school zone. And they work in teams, which means we're talking about $333,000 per year just for this one patrol. Now, he told me that 80% of the tickets that he writes are for the southbound travelway. If you look at those images, you will see why. Let's assume that there's not some kind of magic making people go faster down the southbound travelway than the northbound. Let's assume that the reason for the difference is because of the condition of the markings heading southbound. That means 60% of those people would not have gotten tickets. Now, if we cut down the southbound travelway by 60%, that's 1,080 people per year who would not have gotten tickets because they would have known they were in a school zone and they would have slowed down. We do not have a problem with people wanting to speed in zones in this city. We have a problem with poor markings, and it is not just this zone, it is all of the zones. I spoke to traffic engineering, and they told me that the things that are not consistent from zone to zone include the placement of the signs relative to the school, the minimum and maximum distances between signs, number of signs per zone, placards showing the time for the school zone, the time that the school zone is in effect, flashing indicators.
Sir,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
All right, you get the idea. We need better signs, better markings, not cameras.
Thank you, sir. That was the final speak. Okay. All right. Please call the vote.
District 3,
Yes.
4,
Yes.
District 5? No. District 6?
Yes.
District 7? District 9? District 1?
Yes.
District 2? Motion is approved. Resolution 11, 2018, a resolution of the Lafayette City Parish Council supporting a bill to be filed in the 2018 regular legislative session of the Louisiana Legislature in support of right-of-way acquisition for city parish drainage, road, and bridge projects prior to final judgment in an expropriation proceeding.
Motion by Councilman Bellard, second by Councilman Terrio. Any council discussion? Seeing none, any public comment?
Yes, sir. We did have one citizen who does not wish to speak, but signed in to oppose the resolution. We do have one speaker, Michael Walden.
Okay.
Hello again, I'm Dr. Michael Walden, 110 Seville Boulevard. I oppose this resolution. if you read the information that was provided to the public, which was just a picture of the document, not the document, but what we've been given is very vague. It's really unclear what you're voting to support, and I hope you don't want to do that. It also, the language that's there is like newspeak. All through it, it says, we support property rights. We do nothing to reduce property rights of owners. Well, of course, you're reducing the property rights of owners. That's what you're talking about. So taking away any sort of due process from property owners as you take their property, that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing in the United States. We've seen tremendous problems with takings of property and purchase of property in Louisiana. As I've been active in looking at this I-49 connector project that's been going on, we've seen that the DOTD came in and bought a site that was an old dry cleaning operation. I can't find any place where they did a phase 1 or phase 2 hazardous waste study to see if that was contaminated. Most old dry cleaning locations are. It appears they did the phase 1 study after the fact. And these are really problems. If you were working with a bank trying to buy property, you'd never be allowed to do that. Also, we need to be sure, because there are so many contaminated properties in this city. We're an old city. We need to make sure that anything that's acquired undergoes a phase 1 study at least, and if there's a hint that there's a contamination at the site, you need to do a phase 2 study. We see an excellent example of messing up and buying contaminated land when you look in Lake Charles. DOTD bought land to build the new I-10 bridge. Then they figured out that it's contaminated and it's going to cost the taxpayers a huge amount of money to clean it up. Now we're being told, oh, it's going to cost so much money to build that bridge. The new I-10 bridge, Sean Wilson tells us, the Secretary of DOTD, that the new I-10 bridge will have to be a toll bridge. So we're going to start paying tolls. In part, that's coming from the error of buying contaminated land and not being careful, not being prudent. And I fear that this resolution will lead to some imprudent actions. Finally, in talking to Sean Wilson again about the problems of takings, Sean Wilson told me that if you take property, then the government agency that took the property now has all environmental liability for the property, that you also take the liability when you take the property. If you buy it from a willing seller, the liability, if you find contamination on it, reverts back to the willing seller. If you take his property, you've taken his liability. And many property owners will be eager for you to come and take their property. Moving too quickly on takings, I think, can be a real problem. And this vague resolution that doesn't really say what you want, I think could be a real problem for the city and lead to some horrible mistakes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilman Terrio.
Yes, real quick, and please include Mr. Robideau and Mr. Ascott, and maybe Mr. Hebert. In dealing with this resolution, we want to be very clear that this deals with drainage improvements, roads, and bridges. Is the 38113 a part of this, Mr. Hebert?
38113, meaning
The process that we use in order to move forward with projects, or is this is that involved with this in any way?
all that this does, the only thing that this changes from anything that the city currently does is that the city would not have to wait the entirety of a lawsuit for the valuation of the property. The actual acquisition of the property is never at issue in these proceedings. It's the valuation of the property. And the property owner preserves at all times the right to contest the valuation of the property that's placed upon it by the city. or by the LCG when they attempt to acquire it. And that is preserved throughout this entire process. The only difference is that the actual acquisition of the property comes now at the beginning of this process rather than at the end. And that's never in doubt in these expropriation proceedings as to whether or not the government is going to have the ability to actually acquire that property. It's the valuation of the property that's always critical in these
And
proceedings.
I think you brought up a good point in that the actual act, whether it deals with drainage, roads, or bridges, the actual function of construction or getting involved with the project happens much sooner
Yes, sir.
with this.
And I think that's the critical point that's being made by this resolution and also by the proposed bill, is that projects often get delayed for a very substantial period of time. And I've personally been involved in some litigation that took years to acquire the property, but what was really in play was the valuation of the property, because those two things could not be separated and cannot, under current law, for us, be separated.
And the good point we have, and Mr. Robodeau has implemented these drainage projects, the lists of all that. In the past, without this, we would possibly be delayed longer than we should. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes, sir.
So this is moving those projects up to the forefront, so we don't have to wait as long, basically.
Correct. That's exactly right.
Yeah, good, very good. Thank you both. That's all I have.
All right. Councilman Bellard?
Yes, I'd like to read a whereas clause, just so everyone in the public understands what the city parish president is attempting to do. Whereas, subject to the foregoing, the Lafayette City Parish Council finds that it is in the public interest to foster and to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of the city and parish of Lafayette. For Lafayette City Parish consolidated government to have the ability to acquire the property necessary for the construction, repair, or enhancement of drainage, roads, and bridges prior to final judgment and expropriation proceeding. So, Mr. Hebert, if you can sum that up of what we're trying to do, or Mr. Robodeau, either one of the intent of this, I think it's all good. We're not just going quick take people's property. It's going to be something that we would need for the betterment of the citizens and safety. Either one of you, I just want to get it on the record. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman Bellard. Yeah, certainly as it relates, and we were very limiting it to drainage and roads and bridges, because we know that that's the situation that our constituents, I think, are most concerned about. And so we wanted to speed up that process in a way that the law allows, and this resolution does it. And just to address some of the stuff that was said earlier about it being vague, I think this resolution is very clear about what we're trying to do, at the same time that we're protecting the property owner's rights to contest the value. We want to speed the process up to be able to do the work on drainage and bridges and roads as the public is demanding. So that's exactly what we're doing.
If I could just add one more piece to that, just to make it clear that this is not an unusual power either, that DOTD has had this authority for many, many years. Numerous other local governments in Louisiana, among them Shreveport, Bossier, Baton Rouge, Alexandria, New Orleans, Calcasieu Parish, City of Lake Charles, City of Ruston, Pineville, Youngsville even, have had this either generally or for particular projects for many, many years. So it's not, we're not doing anything particularly unusual that hasn't already been well established in the law for other jurisdictions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mike Hebert, for your clarification and your knowledge. All right. Okay. Any other, not seeing any other speakers? Okay. Please call the vote.
District 4? Yes. District 5?
Yes.
District 6?
Yes.
District 7?
Yes.
District 9?
Yes.
District 1?
Yes.
District 2?
Yes.
District 3? Motion to adopt is approved. Resolution 12, 2018, a resolution of the Lafayette City Parish Council authorizing the disposition of surplus property currently owned by the Lafayette City Parish Consolidated Government Library Books.
Got a motion by Councilman Conk and a second by Councilman Boudreaux. Any council discussion in regards to number 11? Seeing none, any public comment? Yes, sir. All right, please call the roll.
District 5?
Yes.
District 6?
Yes.
District 7?
Yes.
District 9?
Yes.
District 1?
Yes.
District 2? District 3? District 4? Motion to adopt is approved. Resolution 13, 2018, a resolution of the Lafayette City Parish Council authorizing the filing of an application by the Lafayette Police Department for a 2018 Improving Criminal Justice Responses to Sexual Assault, Domestic Violence, Dating Violence, and Stalking Grant from the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Violence Against Women.
Got a motion by Councilman Boudreaux and a second by Councilman Bellard. Any council discussion? Seeing none. Any public comment?
Yes, sir.
Okay, please call the roll.
District 6?
Yes.
District 7?
Yes.
District 9?
Yes.
District 1?
Yes.
District 2? District 3? District 4? District 5? Motion to adopt is approved. Resolution 14, 2018, a resolution of the Lafayette City Parish Council giving preliminary approval to the issuance of utilities revenue bonds of the City of Lafayette, State of Louisiana, in a total amount not exceeding $240 million, authorizing the officials of the city to proceed with the preparation of documents required for the issuance of such utilities revenue bonds, applying to the State Bond Commission for consent and authority to issue such bonds, and providing for other matters in connection therewith.
All right, I have a motion by Councilman Boudreaux. I have a second by Councilman Conk. I'd like to announcement that there's an amendment that is proposed to amend Section 5 and delete Section 6 with reference to the bond counsel and the underwriter. Got a movement by Councilman Boudreaux and a second by Councilman Conk. Any discussion? Councilman Boudreaux, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, in addition to that, based on an action taken earlier by LPUA, I'm going to be offering an additional amendment, and that amendment is going to reflect changes in the title of the resolution, in the first whereas clause, line item number 4, as well as section 2, line item 2. And that is going to be to reduce the $240 million allocation to $70 million in all three of those locations, and I offer that